Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sleep Space. Tonight, we will talk about levels of consciousness. As you settle into your space, maybe lying beneath soft blankets or letting your body melt into stillness, imagine yourself gently sinking below the surface of awareness, like a diver entering deeper waters. Consciousness is what you are experiencing right now, the flicker of thought, the hum of your mind, the feeling of being awake. But it's also the great mystery behind everything you will ever know. Scientists have spent decades trying to map it, philosophers have built worlds of ideas around it, and mystics have claimed to travel through its hidden layers. Yet even now, no one can fully explain why you feel like you. The brain's electrical storms produce thoughts, sensations, and memories. But why do they come together as a single, unified experience? Each day, you move through levels of awareness without even noticing, from alert focus to daydreaming to the drifting edges of sleep. These transitions hint at something profound. Consciousness isn't one fixed thing. It shifts, expands, contracts, and sometimes dissolves entirely. And what's even more curious, your perception of the world and even of yourself changes with it. Picture your mind as an ocean. The surface represents your waking state, the place of logic, problem solving, and speech. Beneath it are the slower, quieter layers, the subconscious currents carrying forgotten memories, unspoken desires, and the raw emotions that shape your behavior. Go deeper still, and you reach the dark, mysterious realm where consciousness begins to blur with something else entirely. Perhaps the infinite, perhaps nothing at all. For thousands of years, humans have described these layers in different ways. Ancient texts from India spoke of the waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states as gateways to the true self, the one beyond all levels. Western psychology later mapped stages of awareness through Freud's model of conscious, subconscious, and unconscious mind. And modern neuroscience has added its own language: brainwave frequencies, neural synchrony, global workspace theory. Each system points to the same underlying truth: that consciousness exists in gradients, not absolutes. When you fall asleep, your brain's activity slows, and awareness begins to fragment. Yet something within you remains aware of the drift, the faint knowing that you are slipping away. In dreams, that awareness reshapes reality entirely, showing that consciousness doesn't just receive the world, it can create one. Even when the waking mind fades, the deeper self continues to observe silently. But what exactly determines your level of consciousness? Scientists measure it through patterns of neural activity: beta waves for alertness, alpha for relaxation, theta for meditation, delta for deep sleep. Yet the experience itself feels far more than electrical rhythms. You've felt it: the moment of clarity during a quiet walk, when your mind seems to open wider than usual, or the strange sense of shrinking when you're lost in thought, as if your awareness has narrowed into a single idea. These are shifts, subtle but profound, through different dimensions of consciousness. Some theories suggest that consciousness is not produced by the brain at all, but filtered through it. Like a radio tuning to certain frequencies, your mind may simply receive awareness, limiting the infinite spectrum into a single, coherent experience. Others argue the opposite, that consciousness is entirely emergent, a byproduct of neural complexity. Both ideas are astonishing in their own way. One places you as a receiver of universal awareness, the other as a brief, miraculous spark in an unconscious cosmos. As you listen tonight, you might start to notice the movements of your own awareness, the rise and fall of focus, the subtle way attention drifts outward and inward. What happens when you stop thinking, even for a second? Is there still an observer present? What if consciousness doesn't vanish when thought stops, but instead expands into something larger, something that doesn't need words to know itself? Consciousness, at its core, is both familiar and alien. You live inside it every second, but you can never step outside to examine it directly. It's the one thing you cannot escape or fully understand. You can study brain scans, analyze behavior, even alter perception through meditation or substances. But what consciousness is remains beyond the reach of instruments. In a way, exploring it is like exploring the dream you're living right now. The mind studies itself using the very tool it's trying to understand. You, the observer, are both the question and the answer. So tonight, as you drift deeper into calm, we'll move slowly through the layers of awareness, each one revealing a different face of what it means to be conscious. From the biological rhythms of the brain to the uncharted territories of self-awareness and transcendence, you'll see how every level, waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and beyond, connects to something ancient within you. And as you rest, your own consciousness will begin its quiet descent, passing from wakefulness to something softer, deeper, and more mysterious, the place where words fade and only experience remains. Are you ready to explore how deep your awareness truly goes? Every experience you have, every sound, every image, every thought, emerges from a vast network of living cells inside your brain. Right now, billions of neurons are firing, creating a shimmering electrical pattern unique to this moment. These pulses of energy don't just reflect what you're thinking, they are what you're thinking. Each one contributes to the orchestra of consciousness, the delicate balance between chaos and order that lets you feel awake. At the most basic level, consciousness depends on the brain's ability to integrate and coordinate information. It's not enough for individual neurons to fire, they must communicate in harmony across distant regions. In a sense, the brain is always holding a meeting with itself, linking sensory data, memory, emotion, and decision-making into a unified scene. You are that meeting. You are the point where billions of signals converge into one continuous experience. Neuroscientists describe this using what's called the global workspace theory. Imagine your brain as a dark theatre filled with countless actors, each representing a neural network. Most of them are working quietly backstage, processing information unconsciously. But occasionally, one idea or sensation steps into the spotlight. When it does, it becomes globally available, seen, heard, and felt across the mind's many systems. That spotlight is your conscious awareness. Everything outside it, every unnoticed sound, every forgotten sensation, still exists, but remains in shadow. You can feel this dynamic even now. Try to focus on your breathing. For a moment, everything else fades into the background. Then, as you think about something else, maybe the sound of my voice or an image in your mind, the focus shifts, the spotlight moves, and the rest of the stage disappears. This constant shifting is what keeps your consciousness alive, the brain continuously deciding what matters enough to be brought into awareness. Scientists have discovered that different states of consciousness correspond to different electrical rhythms in the brain. When you're wide awake and focused, your neurons fire rapidly and irregularly, creating high-frequency beta waves. When you relax, alpha waves dominate, slower, smoother patterns that often appear when you close your eyes or meditate. As you drift towards sleep, your brain produces theta waves, then delta waves during deep rest. These patterns aren't just signs of consciousness, they are its architecture, each rhythm supporting a different level of experience. Yet these electrical signatures only tell part of the story. Consciousness isn't merely the sum of neurons firing, it's the coordination among them. Some researchers believe that when large groups of neurons synchronize their activity across the brain, a unified experience emerges. In that moment, information flows freely between sensory and cognitive regions, giving rise to the feeling of being present. When this synchronization breaks down, as in deep sleep, anesthesia, or coma, conscious experience fades. But even that explanation raises questions. How does a pattern of energy create the feeling of being? How does the electrical activity in 1 kilogram of living tissue produce joy, curiosity, or awareness of time, the science is profound, but the mystery deepens. It's as if the universe, through the brain, has found a way to look back at itself. Consider this: every colour you see, every sound you hear, is not the world itself, but the brain's translation of energy into perception. Light waves and air vibrations have no colour or sound until your brain interprets them. Consciousness doesn't just detect reality, it creates the version of reality you can experience. Your perception of red, your sense of warmth, even the taste of something sweet. These are all brain-generated experiences layered over an unseen physical world. And then there's the body. While the brain gets most of the attention, consciousness is deeply tied to the entire nervous system. Your gut, your heart, even the subtle tension in your muscles constantly send signals to the brain, shaping your emotional state and awareness. That flutter in your stomach when you're nervous, that calm warmth when you're safe. These are forms of embodied consciousness. They remind you that awareness isn't just in your head, it's spread throughout your entire being. Some studies even suggest that consciousness may not depend on specific structures, but on connectivity. When communication between different regions of the brain becomes rich and dynamic, consciousness flourishes. When it becomes rigid or isolated, awareness narrows. This might explain why altered states, through meditation, deep focus, or certain chemicals, can feel expansive. They temporarily change the way information flows, allowing new regions of the brain to interact in unexpected ways. It's possible that what you call you is simply the most coherent version of this ongoing conversation, a continuous broadcast of brain activity tuned into a narrow band of reality. But when you begin to alter that tuning, consciousness reveals new depths. So as you think of consciousness tonight, imagine it not as a light switch that's either on or off, but as a vast dimmer with infinite shades. Every thought, every emotion, every sensation changes the brightness in subtle ways. From the sharp focus of alertness to the soft glow of dreaming, you are constantly moving through an invisible spectrum of awareness. And beneath all of it, there's still that quiet question lingering at the edges of science. Even if we can explain how consciousness functions, can we ever explain why it feels like something to exist? Why there's an inner movie at all? You live most of your life guided by forces you cannot see. Beneath the thin layer of awareness where thoughts and decisions take shape, there exists a vast and intricate landscape, the subconscious mind. It is not silent, though it rarely speaks in words. Instead, it communicates through impulses, habits, memories, and the faint whisper of intuition that seems to appear from nowhere. Right now, even as you listen, your subconscious is working tirelessly. It's controlling your heartbeat, regulating hormones, predicting what sound will come next, and quietly colouring every emotion you feel. You might think of it as the backstage crew of the theatre of consciousness. The spotlight shines on only a few actors at a time, your conscious thoughts. But behind the curtain, thousands of unseen hands adjust the lights, change the scenery, and guide the entire performance. This deeper level of consciousness is not separate from you. It is you in a more fundamental way. It holds everything you've ever experienced, every sound, image, and emotion, stored not as a perfect archive, but as impressions that constantly influence your present moment. A single smell might awaken a forgotten childhood memory. A phrase might bring back a long-buried feeling. These echoes rise from the subconscious, reshaping your perception of the world before you even realize it. Neuroscientists estimate that the subconscious mind processes information at a rate millions of times faster than conscious awareness. While your conscious mind can focus on one or two things at once, the subconscious absorbs and analyzes everything around you. The temperature of the air, the tone in a person's voice, the micro expressions that reveal truth or deceit. It is your internal supercomputer working tirelessly to keep you alive and oriented in an infinitely complex world, and yet it remains hidden. Why? Perhaps because consciousness itself evolved as a kind of filter. If you were aware of every piece of sensory data entering your brain, you'd drown in it. The conscious mind narrows the field of experience so that you can act decisively within it. But beneath that focus, your subconscious continues to weave the patterns that shape what you see, think, and feel. Take memory, for example. You believe you recall your past clearly, but memory is not a recording, it's a reconstruction, pieced together by the subconscious each time you remember. When you recall a moment, your brain reactivates the neural networks involved in that experience. But in doing so, it subtly rewrites them. Each act of remembering alters the memory itself. Over time, your past becomes a living, changing story, guided by emotional needs, interpretations, and beliefs you may not even notice. Dreams are another expression of this hidden realm. In the dream state, when your rational mind is asleep, the subconscious takes control of the stage. It speaks in images, metaphors, and emotions instead of words. You might see faces that shift, landscapes that dissolve, impossible scenes that feel utterly real. These are not random. They are the subconscious mind's way of integrating experiences, resolving conflicts, and exploring possibilities your waking self cannot yet face directly. Sigmund Freud called dreams the royal road to the unconscious, believing they were coded messages from the hidden self. Carl Jung took it further, suggesting the subconscious connects not just to personal memory, but to something larger, the collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of symbols and archetypes that appear in every culture. When you dream of flying, falling, or being chased, you're touching imagery that has appeared in human minds for thousands of years. It's as if consciousness, in its deeper layers, remembers more than just your individual life. Modern neuroscience views dreams differently, yet still sees meaning in them. During REM sleep, when vivid dreaming occurs, the brain's emotion centers are highly active while the rational prefrontal cortex is subdued. This allows ideas and memories to connect in novel ways, forming strange but creative narratives. The subconscious is experimenting, rearranging data, releasing tension, processing emotions. It's not chaos, it's a kind of nightly therapy session conducted in symbols. But the subconscious doesn't only reveal itself through dreams, you see its fingerprints in your waking life too. When you suddenly know what to do without being able to explain why, that's intuition, your subconscious pulling together thousands of hidden data points and presenting the conclusion as a feeling. When a song gives you chills for no clear reason, it's your subconscious recognizing patterns of emotion that transcend language. Even creativity, the spark of insight that seems to arrive from nowhere, often emerges from the subconscious. Artists, scientists, and writers throughout history have described moments when inspiration appeared suddenly, as if whispered from another dimension of the mind. What's really happening is that the subconscious has been quietly processing the problem all along, free from the narrow logic of conscious reasoning. When the pieces align, the solution surfaces in a flash of awareness. Some people learn to communicate with this deeper level intentionally. Through meditation, hypnosis, or deep focus, they bypass the surface chatter of the conscious mind and listen to the quiet intelligence beneath. Hypnotic states, for instance, show measurable changes in brain activity, reducing activity in the critical regions of the prefrontal cortex and enhancing communication between emotional and sensory centers. It's as if the gatekeeper steps aside, allowing the subconscious to speak directly. Meditation achieves a similar effect, but in a gentler way. When you sit in stillness and observe thoughts without reacting, you begin to notice the hidden layers of your mind. Memories, sensations, and emotions rise like bubbles from deep water. Over time, you start to realize that much of what you consider you is simply a stream of subconscious material passing through awareness. The more you observe, the more transparent it becomes. This realization can be liberating or unsettling. It means that much of your behavior is not truly under conscious control. You react, interpret, and decide based on subconscious patterns laid down over years of experience. But awareness of this fact also opens a door. When you observe your subconscious habits clearly, they begin to lose their automatic power. You become less like a machine and more like a participant in your own unfolding. Neuroscientific research supports this. Brain scans often show that decisions are initiated milliseconds before a person becomes aware of choosing. The conscious mind doesn't start the decision, it simply becomes aware of it after the subconscious has already acted. This raises a haunting question. If the subconscious acts first, who is really in control? Perhaps control is not the point. Consciousness might be less about commanding the mind and more about witnessing it. The subconscious moves like a deep current, shaping your life in ways both mysterious and precise. Your awareness rides upon it, illuminating small portions at a time. Together, they form a partnership, the seen and the unseen, the thinker and the dreamer. And sometimes that partnership extends beyond what science can easily describe. There are moments when people sense something before it happens, or when intuition leads them to an outcome reason could not predict. While such phenomena remain controversial, they hint at the possibility that the subconscious might access information beyond the boundaries of ordinary perception. Perhaps through subtle cues, or perhaps through mechanisms not yet understood, the mind may reach farther than we realize. Even without stepping into the paranormal, the subconscious already performs miracles. It learns languages, recognizes faces, detects patterns, and generates emotions, all without your conscious participation. It keeps your heart beating, your lungs breathing, your balance steady. Every heartbeat is an act of unconscious intelligence. You are being kept alive by something that understands far more than you consciously know. Consider how much of life unfolds automatically. You don't think about digesting food, maintaining body temperature, or keeping posture. These actions happen effortlessly because your subconscious runs them. The miracle of life is that you can let go and still exist. But the subconscious doesn't only protect you, it can also trap you. Traumas, fears, and beliefs stored in its depths can shape perception and behavior long after you've forgotten their origins. You might feel anxious without knowing why, or sabotage something you truly want because of a hidden association created long ago. These are not flaws. They're adaptive patterns that once protected you, but now operate out of context. Bringing them into awareness is a slow process, like shining light into the ocean's depths. Therapies and meditative practices that work with the subconscious aim not to destroy these patterns, but to understand them. When you acknowledge what's been hidden, the mind begins to integrate. The boundaries between conscious and subconscious soften. In that blending, people often report a profound sense of inner peace, as if something fractured has become whole again. So, what is this deeper mind really? Is it merely a biological mechanism, a set of automated programs honed by evolution? Or is it something vaster, a portal to a more fundamental level of consciousness that connects all living things? Some traditions say that when you reach the deepest layers of mind, you begin to sense the universal intelligence that animates everything, the same force that guides stars, rivers, and growing trees. Whether you interpret it scientifically or spiritually, the truth remains: you are only partially awake to what you are. The greater part of your mind moves in silence, orchestrating life with breathtaking precision. You are the witness to a masterpiece being created moment by moment from within. At some point in your life, you realized that you were aware. You looked into a mirror or caught your reflection in a passing window and recognized the gaze looking back as your own. That moment, simple yet profound, marks one of the highest levels of consciousness known to exist. Meta-awareness, the awareness of being aware. It's the point where the mind turns its light inward, illuminating itself. The hunter becomes the observer of the hunt, the thinker becomes the one who notices thought. You are no longer just consciousness experiencing the world, you are consciousness knowing that it is experiencing. This recursive loop is both the marvel and the burden of human cognition. It allows reflection, creativity, empathy, and moral reasoning. but also anxiety, self-doubt, and existential fear. Because once you can think about yourself, you can imagine losing yourself. Once you know you exist, you can imagine not existing. From an evolutionary standpoint, self-awareness may have emerged as a survival advantage. Early humans who could model themselves internally, who could predict how others saw them, had a better chance of navigating complex social environments. The ability to imagine your place within a group, to anticipate reactions, to understand intention, gave rise to cooperation, language, and culture. But something else happened, something far stranger. The ability to represent oneself led to the experience of identity, a persistent sense of I, the narrator behind your thoughts, appeared within the flow of consciousness. You began to feel that you're not just aware, but that you own that awareness, that there is a you having this experience, separate from the world being experienced. Yet when you look closer, that sense of self begins to dissolve. Try to locate it right now. Where exactly is you? In the brain? In the body? In the space behind your eyes? You can feel sensations, observe thoughts, recall memories, but can you ever find the observer itself? Every time you look, all you find is another thought, another perception, another flicker of awareness. The observer hides behind the act of observation itself. This paradox lies at the heart of what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. How can subjective experience arise from objective matter? And within that, an even subtler question: what is the nature of the self that experiences it? Neuroscience has tried to approach this mystery by mapping the regions of the brain that activate when you think about yourself. The default mode network, a set of interconnected areas spanning the medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, and angular gyrus, lights up whenever your mind drifts into self-referential thought. When you daydream, imagine your future, or reflect on who you are. This network becomes active. Interestingly, during moments of deep meditation, psychedelic states, or flow experiences, this network quiets down. The boundaries of the self loosen, and people often report feeling a sense of unity or ego dissolution. It's as if the brain's mechanism for maintaining the illusion of a separate I takes a rest, revealing a deeper layer of consciousness beneath it, one that doesn't distinguish between me and world. This raises a profound possibility. Self-awareness might not be the highest level of consciousness, but merely a middle layer, a reflective surface floating atop a much vaster sea. When the surface becomes still, the ocean beneath can be seen clearly. But before diving deeper, consider what self-awareness gives you. It's what allows introspection and moral understanding. You can imagine the feelings of others because you can imagine yourself in their place. Empathy is, in a sense, consciousness recognizing itself in another form. It's the extension of awareness beyond the skin. Psychologists call this theory of mind the ability to attribute mental states to others. It's a complex skill, one that even many animals only partially share. Chimpanzees, dolphins, elephants, and certain birds show signs of self-recognition. When presented with a mirror, some of them touch marks on their own bodies rather than on the reflection, indicating that they recognize the image as themselves. These findings suggest that self-awareness exists along a continuum, not as a single switch flipped only in humans. Still, human meta-awareness seems uniquely recursive. You can not only know that you exist, you can know that you know it. This infinite feedback loop allows for abstraction, art, philosophy, and the awareness of mortality. It's both a gift and a curse. Through it, consciousness contemplates eternity while inhabiting a fragile, temporary body. In this reflective capacity lies the source of both transcendence and suffering. Self-awareness is the birthplace of meaning, but also of the question of meaning. The same mind that marvels at its own existence can also despair at the apparent futility of it. The ancient texts of every culture grapple with this duality. In Buddhism, the self is described as an illusion, a temporary pattern of perception mistaken for a permanent entity. In Western philosophy, Descartes declared, "I think, therefore I am," establishing thought as the foundation of identity. Yet even he could not explain why thinking leads to the feeling of I. Modern neuroscience adds another twist. When researchers study the timing of decisions in the brain, they find that neural activity predicting a choice appears milliseconds before a person becomes consciously aware of making it. It seems that the self, the conscious decision maker, arrives late to its own story. You experience yourself as the author, but in many ways you are reading a script that has already been written by deeper processes. And yet, that awareness, however delayed, changes everything. Because once you know that you are reading the script, you can begin to interpret it differently. You may not control the subconscious mechanisms that generate thought, but you can witness them, question them, and gradually alter their patterns through insight. This is where self-awareness becomes transformative rather than merely reflective. You begin to notice that your thoughts are not truths, that emotions rise and fall without your permission, that even your identity shifts depending on context. What remains constant then? What is the core that persists as everything changes? If you look deeply enough, you might find that there is no solid core at all, only awareness itself, flowing freely moment to moment. You are not the contents of consciousness, but the field in which they appear. That realization, experienced directly rather than conceptually, has been described in countless mystical traditions. It's the recognition that consciousness doesn't belong to you. You belong to consciousness. The self you think you are is a temporary pattern within it, like a whirlpool within the river. The whirlpool has shape and movement, but it is never separate from the water that forms it. In recent years, cognitive scientists have begun to model this mathematically. The Integrated Information Theory, IIT, proposed by neuroscientist Giulio Tononi, suggests that consciousness corresponds to the degree of information integration in a system. The more a system's parts influence one another, the higher its level of consciousness. Under this view, self-awareness emerges when a system becomes complex enough to model itself internally, to contain an image of its own structure. The universe, through such systems, gains the ability to observe itself. But there's an aspect of self-awareness that science can measure only indirectly, the subjective quality of recognition, the moment of I am. Every culture has wrestled with what that phrase means. In some traditions, it's considered the divine spark within, the fragment of universal awareness that experiences itself as a person. In others, it's seen as a psychological construction, a necessary illusion for navigating the physical world. Both may be true. The self may be an illusion, but it's a functional one, an interface that allows consciousness to interact with matter. Like a cursor on a computer screen, it represents your point of contact with the world. The cursor isn't the computer. It's a symbol that lets you operate within it. Likewise, the I isn't the totality of what you are. It's the symbol through which awareness engages with experience. When that symbol loosens, through meditation, deep love, art, or awe, you sometimes glimpse what exists beyond it. The moment of standing beneath a vast sky and feeling both infinitesimal and infinite at once. The sudden silence that follows a profound realization. The stillness after tears. These are moments when self-awareness stretches towards something larger, when the boundary between observer and observed becomes porous. Such moments can be disorienting. They challenge the everyday assumption that you are separate, autonomous, and solid. But they can also be deeply freeing, because if the self is not absolute, then its fears, desires, and limitations may not be absolute either. Imagine for a moment consciousness as a vast field of light. Most of the time, your attention forms into a beam, a narrow ray that illuminates the objects of your focus. That beam is self-awareness. It defines what is you and what is not you. But sometimes the beam widens. It stops pointing at things and begins to reveal the light itself. That's metaconsciousness, awareness recognizing itself as awareness. From this perspective, you can still act, think, and feel, but with a subtle shift. The weight of identity softens. Experience flows through without clinging. You still play your role in the story, but you no longer mistake the role for the actor. Interestingly, this expansion of awareness often brings not detachment, but compassion. When you see that the same consciousness animates everything, empathy becomes natural. The suffering of another is not separate from your own. The joy of another resonates as if it were yours. Self-awareness evolves into transpersonal awareness, the recognition that consciousness is not confined to the individual. In that sense, self-awareness might be a bridge rather than a destination. It connects the personal to the universal, the mind to the mystery. It's the level where consciousness becomes curious about itself, where you, as a fragment of the infinite, begin to ask what it means to exist at all. You could say that consciousness dreams itself as you in order to see itself from a new angle. Every thought, every reflection, every moment of recognition is the universe folding back to gaze upon its own face. And in that gaze lies both wonder and peace. Because to be aware of being aware is to stand at the edge of the infinite, looking in both directions at once. There are moments when the familiar boundaries of awareness dissolve, when the sense of being a separate self fades into something vast, ungraspable, yet profoundly intimate. In those moments, consciousness seems to expand beyond the personal, beyond the body, even beyond time. These are the higher or altered states of consciousness, experiences that have shaped religion, art, and philosophy for as long as humans have existed. Throughout history, people have sought ways to reach these states. Through fasting, chanting, breathwork, meditation, dance, or the ingestion of sacred plants, they've discovered that awareness can be altered in ways both astonishing and humbling. What they encountered in those states was often described as divine, infinite, or more real than waking life. For many, it wasn't an escape from reality, it was an unveiling of it. Modern science now studies these states with tools that ancient mystics could never have imagined: brain imaging, neural modeling, and controlled pharmacology. Yet despite the precision of the data, the mystery remains. When consciousness expands, something happens that can't be captured by numbers alone. The ineffable quality of unity, of oneness, of being absorbed into the fabric of existence itself. Researchers at Johns Hopkins and Imperial College London have spent decades exploring the neural signatures of such transcendence using psychedelics like psilocybin, LSD, and DMT. These substances, long used in shamanic and spiritual traditions, appear to quiet the default mode network, the same brain system responsible for maintaining your sense of self. When this network relaxes, the boundaries of the ego soften, and previously isolated regions of the brain begin to communicate freely. The result is an explosion of connectivity, a neural symphony unrestricted by the usual hierarchies of control. Participants in these studies often describe the experience as ego dissolution, the disappearance of the sense of I. Time loses its meaning. The boundary between self and world blurs. Colors seem alive, sound becomes tactile, and emotions take on a cosmic scale. Many report encountering a presence, something vast and intelligent that feels both external and intimately familiar. When they return, their sense of life's meaning often shifts dramatically. They speak of renewed compassion, decreased fear of death, and a deep conviction that everything is connected. From a neuroscientific perspective, these transformations make sense. When the brain's predictive models, the filters that normally organize perception, are disrupted, consciousness becomes more fluid. You begin to perceive reality not through the lens of expectation, but in its raw, unfiltered immediacy. It's as if the world is being experienced for the first time, radiant and alive. Yet even outside of pharmacological methods, humans can reach similar states through meditation and breath. Monks who have spent decades in contemplative practice show remarkably similar brain patterns to those under the influence of psychedelics. Reduced activity in the default mode network and increased synchronization across distant neural regions. The result, in both cases, is an expanded awareness free from the usual narrative of self. In deep meditation, you might experience this expansion gradually. At first, thoughts quiet, then sensations blur into pure awareness. Eventually, even the distinction between observer and observed can vanish. You no longer feel like a mind inside a body, but like awareness itself, boundless, clear, and still. Many traditions describe this as non-dual consciousness, where subject and object merge into one seamless reality. What's remarkable is that these descriptions, whether from monks, mystics, or neuroscientists, converge on the same core insight. Consciousness can exist without the story of me, and when it does, what remains is often described as blissful, luminous, and profoundly peaceful. In Hindu philosophy, this state is known as samadhi, the complete absorption of the mind into pure awareness. In Buddhism, it is nirvana, the extinguishing of the illusion of separation. In Christian mysticism, it's called union with God. The language changes, but the essence remains the same. The realization that consciousness is not something you have, it's what you are. But why do these experiences feel more real than ordinary life? Some scientists propose that in these states, the brain's hierarchical predictive coding relaxes, allowing sensory data and inner emotion to merge in a more direct way. Others suggest that the brain, freed from filtering, may be glimpsing the fundamental nature of reality, a reality usually hidden beneath the constraints of survival-based perception. This raises a radical question. If the brain normally limits your consciousness to navigate daily life, could transcendence reveal a truer form of perception rather than an illusion? Aldous Huxley once described the brain as a reducing valve that filters the vastness of mind at large into a manageable trickle. In moments of transcendence, that valve opens and you experience the immensity that was always there. You might think of it as tuning into a wider frequency of existence. In ordinary awareness, your consciousness is like a radio locked to one channel, your individual story. But in expanded states, the tuner shifts. Suddenly, you can sense the music of everything at once, the pulse of life resonating through all things. It's not that you enter another world, but that you perceive this one more completely. These experiences can be life-altering. People who've had profound transcendental states often describe a lasting shift in values, a move toward compassion, simplicity, and interconnectedness. They begin to see the self not as a fixed identity, but as a temporary expression of something greater. Fear of death diminishes because consciousness is no longer seen as confined to a single body. Instead, it feels like part of an ongoing continuum, a field that flows through all beings. Of course, such experiences are not without risk. The dissolution of self can be disorienting, even frightening, if the person is unprepared. That's why spiritual traditions emphasize discipline and guidance, a gradual unfolding rather than a sudden collapse of identity. Integration is crucial to bring the insights of higher consciousness back into daily life, to live with open awareness rather than retreat into abstraction. And yet, when approached with respect, these glimpses of transcendence can expand the boundaries of what it means to be human. They invite you to consider that consciousness might not be a small light flickering within your skull, but the very fabric of existence, the field in which reality itself unfolds. Physicist Erwin Schrödinger once wrote, "The total number of minds in the universe is one. In that light, your individual consciousness may be like a wave rising from the ocean of being, temporary in form, eternal in essence. When the wave subsides, the ocean remains." Modern physics doesn't claim to prove this, but it resonates strangely with quantum theory, where the act of observation plays a central role. Some interpretations suggest that reality itself might be participatory, that the universe doesn't fully manifest until it's perceived. If that's true, consciousness isn't just a product of the cosmos, it's a partner in its creation. Perhaps the most profound realization in transcendent states is not that you encounter something outside yourself, but that you awaken to what has always been within you. The boundaries between inner and outer collapse, and what remains is an undivided whole. You don't see the universe, you are the universe seeing itself. This idea might sound abstract, but it's deeply experiential. Many who've touched this state describe an overwhelming sense of love, not sentimental emotion, but a pure recognition of unity. Everything, even pain and imperfection, appears as part of one vast intelligence unfolding itself. In that recognition, the endless striving of the self relaxes. You no longer feel the need to become anything because you realize you already are everything. And when you return to ordinary awareness, something lingers. A quiet knowing that the world is not as separate as it seems, that the same consciousness animating you animates the trees, the stars, the people you meet. Life becomes less about control and more about participation, a dance rather than a struggle. These moments of transcendence are rare, but they remind you of something essential. Consciousness has depths you have barely begun to explore. What you call waking life may be just one layer of a much larger spectrum, and the higher you ascend, or the deeper you descend, the more you discover that the hierarchy itself dissolves. All levels are expressions of the same infinite awareness, playing different notes of the same eternal song. To glimpse that is to touch the mystery that lies at the core of existence, the mystery that science, philosophy, and spirituality have all circled for centuries. That consciousness is both the observer and the observed, both the dream and the dreamer, both the question and the answer. And perhaps that's what transcendence truly means. Not to escape reality, but to realize that you were never separate from it in the first place. You live inside a mystery so vast that even the brightest minds of history have only glimpsed its edges. Every thought you have, every color you see, every flicker of emotion or spark of imagination arises from consciousness. Yet science still doesn't know how consciousness comes to be. How does matter become aware of itself? How do electrical patterns in the brain give rise to the taste of coffee, the warmth of sunlight, the feeling of being you? For centuries, this question was seen as unanswerable, a philosophical riddle, not a scientific problem. But in the past few decades, researchers have begun to map the hidden architecture of awareness. They no longer treat consciousness as an illusion or a byproduct. Instead, they study it as one of nature's most fundamental phenomena, something that may hold clues about the nature of reality itself. One of the leading frameworks is the Integrated Information Theory, or IIT, proposed by neuroscientist Giulio Tononi. It begins with a simple idea. Consciousness is not about how much information a system processes, but how integrated that information is. Your brain isn't just a collection of independent circuits, it's a web of interlinked parts, each influencing the other in countless ways. According to IIT, the degree of this integration, called phi, corresponds to the richness of experience. The higher the integration, the deeper the consciousness. Imagine, for instance, a camera with millions of pixels. It can record a huge amount of data, but it doesn't experience anything. Its parts don't communicate meaningfully. Your brain, by contrast, binds information together, sight, sound, memory, emotion, into a unified whole. That unity is what creates the seamless flow of experience. You don't feel like a collection of parts, you feel like one being. In this model, consciousness exists wherever there is sufficient integration. Even a simple organism, a worm, an octopus, maybe even a computer, might possess a faint glimmer of awareness, depending on how its components interact. That idea blurs the line between the animate and inanimate, the sentient and mechanical. It hints that consciousness could be woven through the fabric of existence in varying degrees. This resonates with another ancient, yet increasingly discussed view, panpsychism, the idea that consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, as intrinsic as space, time, or energy. Rather than emerging from complexity, it might be that consciousness was always there, at every scale, even in the simplest particles. Under this view, your mind doesn't arise from matter, it arises within a conscious universe. The brain doesn't create consciousness, it channels it like a radio tuning into a field that's everywhere. Panpsychism isn't just mystical poetry. Some physicists and philosophers, like David Chalmers and Philip Goff, have suggested it as a serious alternative to the limits of materialism. They point out that no theory of matter explains how subjective experience could ever emerge from pure mechanics. To say the brain produces consciousness is like saying a piano produces music. It's true in a sense, but the music also depends on something more fundamental: vibration, pattern, resonance. In this view, consciousness may be the fundamental music of reality. Matter is simply the structure it takes on when expressed through physical form. But there are other models that approach the question from a different angle. Global workspace theory, developed by Bernard Baars and expanded by Stanislas Dehaene, describes consciousness as a stage in the theatre of the mind. Countless unconscious processes operate behind the scenes: sensing, predicting, regulating, remembering. But when certain information becomes globally available, shared across multiple brain systems, it enters the workspace, and that's when you become aware of it. Picture it like this: your brain is filled with actors performing in the dark. When one steps into the spotlight, it's broadcast to the rest of the system. That spotlight is consciousness. It's not everywhere at once, it flickers from moment to moment, deciding what enters awareness and what stays hidden. This theory helps explain the practical nature of consciousness. Awareness isn't just for decoration, it's a coordination tool, a way to unify perception, memory, and action into a single, adaptive whole. Yet even if the mechanics of the spotlight are mapped in exquisite detail, the mystery of who sees it, the raw experience itself, remains untouched. That's what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. We can trace every neuron's firing pattern, every synapse's chemical exchange, but that data doesn't explain why those processes feel like something. Why does the firing of visual neurons produce the experience of blue? Why does the amygdala's activation feel like fear? The hard problem reminds us that subjective experience, the what it's like of being, is not easily reduced to physical explanation. Some scientists, like physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, have gone further, proposing that consciousness might arise not from neural computation, but from quantum processes within the brain's microtubules. Their orchestrated objective reduction theory suggests that consciousness and quantum reality are deeply intertwined, that awareness might be a fundamental aspect of the universe's quantum fabric. While this remains speculative, it echoes the idea that mind and matter could be two sides of the same coin. And then there's predictive processing, another powerful framework gaining ground. It suggests that your brain is not passively observing the world, it's constantly predicting it. Every moment, your brain generates internal models of reality and updates them with sensory input. Consciousness, in this view, arises when prediction errors become significant enough to enter awareness. You don't just experience the world, you experience your brain's best guess of it. This might explain why altered states, like those described earlier, feel so vivid. When the predictive model loosens, raw data floods in. The mind's filters dissolve, and the world appears fresh and alive. Consciousness expands not because you see more, but because you see less through the lens of expectation. Across all these theories, one theme repeats: consciousness involves integration, unity, and feedback. A self-knowing system aware of its own state. But that self-knowing might not be unique to humans. Octopuses, with their distributed nervous systems, show remarkable intelligence and flexibility. Some researchers argue they may experience a kind of decentralized consciousness, each arm possessing partial autonomy, yet unified in intention. Even plants exhibit complex signaling networks, responding to stimuli and communicating chemically in ways that hint at a primitive awareness. The boundary between conscious and unconscious life seems less rigid the more we learn. If consciousness exists on a spectrum, from atoms to humans to galaxies, then perhaps what we call levels of consciousness are simply degrees of self-reflection within a single universal field. Your awareness might be one ripple in a sea of consciousness that spans everything. Some physicists, like John Wheeler, speculated about a participatory universe, where observers and observed are inseparable. The universe, in this sense, is not a machine running on its own. It's an evolving conversation between matter and mind. Consciousness could be the way the universe experiences itself, and yet this doesn't mean science must abandon rigor for mysticism. It may simply mean expanding its definition of what counts as fundamental. For centuries, physics treated matter as the base layer and mind as a byproduct. But what if it's the other way around? What if mind is primary and matter emerges from the play of awareness, like patterns on the surface of a deeper intelligence? This is not a rejection of science, but its continuation in a new direction, one that recognizes that observation, measurement, and awareness are not external to the universe, but part of its internal logic. The experimenter and the experiment are woven from the same thread. As you reflect on this, notice how consciousness itself resists analysis. You can study it endlessly, describe its features, measure its correlates, but the moment you turn inward to find it, it slips beyond grasp. You cannot step outside awareness to observe it, because you are it. That's perhaps the deepest truth hidden in all these theories, that consciousness might be irreducible because it is the foundation of everything else. It is not a phenomenon within the universe. It is the condition that makes the universe appear. Every neuron, every atom, every mathematical equation unfolds within it, and when you experience even the smallest flicker of awareness, when you breathe, when you look, when you wonder, you're touching the same mystery that drives galaxies to form and stars to burn. The scientific models are not the answer. They are mirrors reflecting different aspects of the same enigma. Each theory, no matter how precise, eventually bends toward the same question: how can the universe know itself? And maybe that is the ultimate level of consciousness. Not a destination, but a realization that the quest to understand awareness is awareness itself evolving, turning inward, seeking its own source. That realization is what links science and spirituality, logic and wonder, the measurable and the ineffable. You are both the observer and the observed, the question and the curiosity that asks it. And as you explore these models, neurons, information, quantum states, remember that all of them are taking place within you, within the very awareness trying to understand itself. The mystery doesn't lie out there somewhere in the universe. It's right here, looking through your eyes, listening to these words, asking quietly, "What am I?" As you reflect on your own awareness, consider this. The universe itself might be conscious, in ways far larger and subtler than the human mind can grasp. The same principles that govern neurons, networks, and predictive processing may also operate on scales that stretch across galaxies, stars, and the invisible web of cosmic energy. The level of complexity that allows for human awareness is mirrored everywhere, perhaps in forms beyond our comprehension. Cosmology tells us that the universe is not static. It evolves. Stars ignite and collapse, galaxies collide, black holes form and evaporate, and energy flows endlessly through vast networks. These processes are structured, dynamic, and interconnected, not unlike the networks in your brain. Just as neurons fire in coordinated patterns to produce consciousness, the cosmic web, the filamentary structures connecting galaxies, distributes matter and energy in intricate patterns. Could there be an analogy, however abstract, between the organization of the universe and the organization of mind? Some physicists and theorists suggest that consciousness may not be confined to brains at all. Panpsychism, as mentioned earlier, proposes that all matter has some degree of awareness. If that is true, then consciousness exists wherever matter and energy form sufficiently complex patterns. In this sense, stars, planets, and even the subtle interactions of particles may carry rudimentary proto-consciousness. Over immense scales and eons, the universe itself might be exploring self-knowledge through the unfolding of matter, energy, and life. One way to conceptualize this is through systems theory. Complex systems, whether brains, ecosystems, or galaxies, exhibit emergent properties, behaviors that arise from the interactions of parts rather than from the parts themselves. Consciousness itself is an emergent property of the brain's networked activity. Extrapolate that principle. Could the universe's networks, from the cosmic web to planetary systems, produce an emergent form of awareness, operating across scales unimaginable to you? Astrophysics offers another perspective. Light, energy, and information flow through the cosmos at incredible speeds, connecting distant points across billions of years. Quantum entanglement reveals that particles, once linked, can affect one another instantaneously, no matter the distance. The cosmos is not a collection of isolated objects, but a dynamic, interacting whole. If the universe is a network, consciousness may be a natural consequence of its structure. Awareness may not be localized to a single brain. It may ripple through the cosmic lattice like subtle vibrations in a universal membrane. Even thermodynamics may hint at consciousness on grand scales. Living systems, including brains, maintain order by increasing entropy in their environment. This self-organizing principle is mirrored in stars forming from clouds of gas, planets emerging from disks of dust, and galaxies organizing into clusters. Could the drive to sustain complexity, to maintain patterns of energy flow, be a precursor to consciousness at all scales? The same laws that allow neurons to integrate information may also allow the universe to process itself through the emergence of life and intelligence. Some cosmologists even speculate that the universe might be self-aware in a subtle sense. If life, and by extension consciousness, arises as a natural outcome of physical laws, then over billions of years, stars, planets, and intelligent beings might form a network capable of reflection. Humanity could be one node in this cosmic awareness, a point where the universe observes itself. Every thought you have, every perception, may be part of the universe's attempt to understand its own existence. Quantum mechanics adds further intrigue. The act of observation seems to affect reality at a fundamental level. Particles exist in probability until observed. The observer collapses the wave function into a specific outcome. This suggests that consciousness may not just be a product of the universe, it may participate in shaping it. Your awareness, along with that of countless other conscious beings, might play a role in the unfolding of physical reality itself. From a systems perspective, consciousness can be seen as information integrated and reflected at multiple levels. In the brain, this integration produces the feeling of self. Across planetary, galactic, or universal scales, patterns of information flow, feedback, and self-organization might similarly create a form of awareness. Not personal, but cosmic. This perspective does not require mystical claims. It is a hypothesis grounded in the mathematics of complexity, networks, and emergent phenomena. Even in more speculative physics, ideas like the holographic principle suggest that the universe itself may be a kind of information structure, with the total information encoded at the boundary of space-time. If the universe is fundamentally information, consciousness could emerge wherever sufficient processing occurs. Each living being, each planet, each galaxy might be a node in a vast cosmic computation, contributing to a self-reflective universe. This view also resonates with biological evolution. Life began as simple molecules interacting according to chemical laws. Over billions of years, these interactions became increasingly complex, culminating in brains capable of self-reflection. Evolution may be the universe's way of building increasingly sophisticated mirrors, each organism reflecting and exploring reality in new ways. Human consciousness, then, is not an accident. It is a milestone in the universe's own self-exploration. Imagine, for a moment, that you are not only a node in this network, but a participant in an ongoing cosmic experiment. Every perception, every thought, is a small reflection of the universe contemplating itself. Your awareness is a lens, focused on a tiny slice of space and time, yet connected, through matter, energy, and information, to everything that exists. When you look at the stars, you are seeing parts of the system from which your consciousness arose, parts that continue to mirror it back to you. Interestingly, mathematics hints at this possibility as well. Complexity theory shows that systems with feedback loops, where outputs influence future inputs, can self-organize into stable, adaptive structures. Neural networks exhibit this property, producing intelligence. The universe, as a network of feedback systems on unimaginable scales, may display similar adaptive complexity. Consciousness, therefore, could be seen as an emergent property of self-organizing systems, not restricted to brains alone. Even if this cosmic consciousness is not personal, if it does not have desires, emotions, or identity, it is still a form of awareness, a kind of universal self-reflection. Stars burning, planets orbiting, life evolving. All of it becomes part of a process in which the universe is aware of its patterns. And through humans, this awareness becomes more intimate, more focused. You are a conduit, a focal point, a lens through which the cosmos experiences itself in vivid, subjective detail. Some philosophers call this participatory cosmology. Reality is not fully defined until it is observed. Conscious beings do not simply inhabit the universe, they complete it. Your consciousness may be a microcosmic reflection of the universe's own capacity for awareness, a single note in a symphony that spans galaxies and eons. Yet even as the universe reflects through you, you remain rooted in your body, in the flow of time, in the sequence of neurons firing. Consciousness on this scale is not about control or ego. It is about integration, participation, and resonance. Just as your brain integrates sensory input into a coherent experience, the universe integrates energy, matter, and information into the unfolding of cosmic events. Your awareness is one thread woven into that vast, dynamic tapestry. This perspective invites a quiet humility. You are neither separate from nor above the cosmos. You are a participant, a mirror, and a witness. Every thought, every emotion, every action ripples outward, subtly influencing the patterns of reality, just as distant stars and galaxies influence the gravitational waves and energy flows that eventually affect life on Earth. The cosmic view of consciousness transforms your understanding of time as well. The universe does not unfold solely in linear sequence. Energy, matter, and information propagate across scales, from subatomic particles to clusters of galaxies, in ways that blur cause and effect. Consciousness, too, may not be strictly bound by linear time. It may exist as a dynamic, networked field, reflecting itself across multiple layers simultaneously. And yet, despite this grandeur, consciousness remains intimate. The same principles that allow the universe to reflect on itself in stars and galaxies are at work in your brain, in your awareness. You are a microcosm of the macrocosm, a miniature universe capable of pondering the universe itself. Every thought you have, every sensation you feel, every moment of reflection is part of the same unfolding process that has been playing for billions of years. In this light, the levels of consciousness, from neurons to subconscious processing, from self-awareness to transcendence, and finally to the cosmic scale, form a continuum. Each level mirrors and informs the others. The human mind is not separate from the universe. It is a node within it, a point where the cosmos becomes aware of itself in a uniquely intimate way. You are, in essence, both observer and observed, self and universe, part and whole. And as you contemplate this, you may realize that consciousness is not merely a property of brains or individuals. It is the very medium in which reality itself emerges. As the day ends and the world quiets, you feel your body settling into stillness. Your mind, usually a constant hum of thought, begins to slow. In these moments, the boundaries that separate self from environment soften. Breathing deepens, muscles relax, and consciousness shifts its attention inward. Sleep approaches, not as an absence, but as a transformation, a return to the rhythms that allow awareness to integrate and renew. Sleep is not a passive state. While your body rests, your brain continues to organize, process, and reflect. Dreams emerge, fragments of memory and imagination dancing across the canvas of your subconscious. The mind rehearses, replays, and reconfigures experiences, preparing you to re-enter the waking world with a renewed perspective. Even here, levels of consciousness operate in subtle layers. The deep unconscious weaving patterns, the dreaming mind exploring possibilities, and the latent self observing the interplay of thought and sensation. You may not notice it, but every night your mind revisits the themes of consciousness you've encountered during waking life. Your thoughts, fears, joys, and insights mingle with abstract imagery, creating scenarios that feel both familiar and strange. This nightly processing is part of what allows consciousness to maintain coherence. The brain integrates emotions, memories, and experiences, forming the patterns that shape your waking self. In a sense, sleep is the mind's quiet laboratory, where consciousness experiments with itself, even when you are unaware. As you drift deeper into rest, notice how the distinctions between the levels of consciousness begin to blur. The subconscious, which guides perception and instinct during waking hours, becomes more fluid. Self-awareness softens. The rigid I that navigates life temporarily loosens. Dreams can allow glimpses of transcendence, moments when boundaries dissolve, time bends, and ordinary rules no longer apply. These experiences, though fleeting, echo the altered states you explored in meditation, psychedelics, or contemplative reflection. Sleep is a reminder that consciousness is not fixed. It flows, expands, and contracts, moving effortlessly across layers that you might barely recognize while awake. The resting mind also reflects the cosmic perspective. Just as your neurons communicate in patterns that give rise to your experience, so too does energy flow across the universe in vast, interconnected networks. Stars, galaxies, and planets participate in processes that mirror, in their own scale, the dynamics of your brain. Sleep may be the moment when your mind, even temporarily, aligns with the broader rhythm of existence, attuning to the subtle currents that weave through life and matter. In rest, you are both distinct and part of a larger pattern, an individual node in a web of awareness that stretches far beyond your immediate perception. As dreams shift and memories surface, you may notice that the self is less rigid. You might encounter parts of yourself you did not recognize in waking hours, traits, fears, and desires emerging in new combinations. These fragments remind you that consciousness is not a single point, but a spectrum of experience, flowing from the deepest subconscious to the reflective self, and occasionally, through moments of expansion, touching realms that feel boundless. Sleep allows you to explore these layers safely, offering a nightly rehearsal of the vast capacities of awareness. Integration happens gradually. As your mind rests, experiences and insights coalesce into coherent patterns. What was once fragmented, scattered across different levels of thought and perception, begins to settle. Emotions are processed, memories are organized, and new connections emerge. This integration is vital. It allows the insights gained from reflective states, transcendence, or cosmic contemplation to take root in the waking mind. Without it, consciousness remains disjointed. With it, awareness flows smoothly across levels, from the subconscious to the universal. You might consider sleep as a metaphor for consciousness itself. During waking life, you are like the surface of the mind, active, focused, navigating a world of sensations and thoughts. Sleep, however, is the deeper stream, where patterns form, dissolve, and transform. The mind rests, but it does not cease to exist. It is in these quiet moments that consciousness achieves a kind of harmony, linking subconscious impulses, reflective thought, and perhaps even traces of cosmic awareness. Even when your dreams seem nonsensical, they reflect the mind's remarkable capacity to integrate. Your brain is constantly making sense of input, organizing experiences, and forming connections. In the dream state, this process is less constrained, allowing creativity, insight, and imagination to flourish. Some of the most profound moments of problem solving, artistic inspiration, or emotional processing arise not during active thought, but in this relaxed, receptive state. The resting mind is an active participant in its own development, demonstrating that consciousness is never truly idle. Notice, too, that the sense of self becomes malleable in sleep. The rigid narrative of identity the continuous I you carry during waking hours loosens. You may inhabit multiple roles, perspectives, or even merge with your surroundings. This flexibility highlights an essential truth. The self is not fixed. Consciousness is not confined to a single point of view, but flows across levels, adapting and transforming as needed. Sleep is a nightly reminder that the ego is a temporary structure, a lens through which awareness experiences reality, not its ultimate form. Beyond personal integration, sleep may connect you, in subtle ways, to broader rhythms of life. Circadian cycles, hormonal fluctuations, and even planetary motions influence the patterns of rest and consciousness. In this sense, your sleep is not isolated. It participates in the ongoing dance of the living world. Just as consciousness can span neurons, brains, and perhaps cosmic networks, sleep allows your mind to synchronize with natural cycles, attuning to patterns that extend far beyond your immediate awareness. When you awaken, traces of this integration remain. Dreams fade, but the insights they offer may persist, shaping your thoughts, decisions, and emotions. The mind that rested in layers of subconscious and reflective awareness is now ready to engage with the world more fully, carrying a subtle knowledge of its own depth. Sleep, in this way, becomes a bridge, a nightly passage through which consciousness explores, consolidates, and prepares for continued growth. Reflect for a moment on the journey of awareness you've traced, from the flickers of subconscious thought to the reflective self, from transcendent expansion to cosmic resonance. All of it converges in the simple act of rest. Sleep is not an interruption of consciousness, it is its continuation, its harmonization. It demonstrates that every level of awareness, personal, transcendent, or universal, is interdependent, forming a seamless, flowing whole. In the quiet of night, you can sense that consciousness, at its core, is unified. The boundaries between layers are permeable, the distinctions temporary. What you experience as self, mind, or thought is a manifestation of the same underlying awareness that pulses through life, matter, and perhaps the cosmos itself. Sleep reveals that the many forms of consciousness you've explored are aspects of a single, dynamic reality, ever changing yet fundamentally interconnected. And so, as you surrender to rest, notice the stillness. Let your mind float across its layers without grasping, without judgment. Feel the harmony of integration, the ebb and flow of thought and dream, the unity of awareness within and beyond your body. Sleep is not merely the end of the day, it is a gentle return to the source, a nightly communion with the full spectrum of consciousness, from the microcosm of neurons to the macrocosm of the universe. In these moments, you may glimpse the essence of all you've explored. That consciousness is at once personal and universal, fleeting and eternal, quiet and infinitely expansive. Sleep is the mirror in which the many levels of awareness reflect, integrate, and renew themselves. In this mirror, the self, the mind, and the cosmos are inseparable, flowing together as a single living whole. And as you drift deeper into rest, remember this: every breath, every thought, every fleeting image is part of a continuum that stretches from your deepest subconscious to the stars above. Consciousness is not confined to waking life. It flows through every moment, every layer, every scale. And in sleep, you are both traveller and home, observer and observed, participant in a mystery that is vast, intimate, and endlessly alive.